It was just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, folding laundry and wondering what to cook for dinner. The kind of normal day you don't think twice about. Then my phone buzzed. My sister Emily's name popped up with a photo. I opened it without thinking twice. In that 1 second, everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled. The picture showed my husband Charles holding two tiny newborn babies, one in each arm. The caption underneath read, "Daddy loves you both." My heart didn't race. I didn't scream or cry. I just stood there, phone in my hand, feeling something deep inside me go completely quiet, like a door had slammed shut forever. My name is Nicole. I'm 38 now. For most of my adult life, I believed that if you worked hard, stayed patient, and loved someone with your whole heart, things would eventually work out. I'm a forensic accountant. My job is spotting tiny details that don't add up, numbers that look fine until you dig deeper and realize someone's been hiding something big. I never imagined I'd need those same skills in my own home. Charles and I got married when I was 30. He was the guy who lit up every room. Ambitious, funny, full of big dreams. He co-owned a growing logistics company, and I loved watching him build it. We talked for hours about the family we wanted, how many kids, what names we'd pick, whether we'd stay in the city or move somewhere quieter with a yard. It felt like our future was already written, just waiting for us to live it. But it didn't happen easily. We tried for 2 years naturally before we finally went to doctors. Then came the tests, the appointments, the injections that left dark bruises on my stomach. I started wearing looser clothes so no one would ask questions. We lost 3 pregnancies early on, each one just a flicker of hope on a screen before it was gone. Every loss hurt me deeper than I could explain. Charles seemed to bounce back faster. He'd hold my hand in the waiting rooms and say the same thing every time. "We'll get through this together, babe." I believed him. I really did. My sister Emily was around a lot during those years. 3 years younger than me, always quick with a hug, a home-cooked meal, or a late-night call. She'd tell me how strong I was, how she didn't know how I handled it all. I took her words as love. I never once thought that behind that warm smile there might be something else growing. That Tuesday, after I saw the photo, Emily called right away. I picked up but didn't say a word. Her voice was shaky. "Nicole, I didn't mean for you to see it like that." I hung up. No questions, no shouting. I'd learned from years of work that when you find the first crack, you don't rush in yelling. You step back, gather every piece of evidence, and see the full picture before anyone knows you're looking. So instead of confronting them, I opened my laptop and searched for the best family lawyer in the city. Daniel Brooks had glowing reviews. I booked the earliest slot. 2 days later, I sat in his quiet office that smelled of fresh coffee and signed the first papers to end my 8-year marriage. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I didn't tell Charles. I didn't call Emily back. That night I went home and made dinner like everything was normal. Because for the first time in years, I finally felt in control. While Charles was probably celebrating his new babies with my sister, thinking I was still in the dark, I was already 3 steps ahead. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee for just one person, and felt zero guilt. Charles had texted the night before about a work trip that would keep him away for a few days. Perfect timing. I started digging. People who think they'll never get caught get sloppy. Charles had spent years playing the role of the perfect, supportive husband going through infertility with me. That story took effort to keep up, and when you're busy maintaining one lie, you leave traces of the other one everywhere. I began with our joint account, the one we used for household stuff. Hidden among normal grocery runs and bills, I found charges to a hotel in a suburb we had no reason to visit. 4 separate stays, always Thursday to Friday. I checked the dates against my phone's location history. 3 of them matched weeks I was recovering from treatments. Weeks Charles said he needed to stay late at the office to clear his head. I stayed up until almost 2 in the morning, piecing together the last 3 years. Emily had often offered to drive Charles to appointments when I couldn't. "I'm just helping," she used to say with that sweet smile. But many of those appointments didn't exist on any real schedule. Then I remembered an old shared photo folder from years ago that was never deleted. I logged in. There they were, pictures going back almost 3 years. Emily at his company party standing too close. Weekend trips that weren't business at all. They hadn't been completely reckless, but they never thought I'd look. Finding proof of betrayal hurts in a strange way. It's not just shock, it's the cold realization that the life you were living was partly imaginary. For 8 years, I had blamed my body, blamed stress, blamed myself for every failed pregnancy. I carried that weight alone while the man I trusted was building something else with my own sister. But I didn't cry. I didn't call them. Instead, I did what I do best. I built a file. Every receipt, every mismatched date, every photo with a timestamp. I organized it neatly like evidence for a client. Facts don't need shouting. They speak for themselves. I sent the whole package to Daniel Brooks. In our next meeting, he read through it quietly. When he looked up, he just said, "This is very thorough." I told him I'd had 8 years of practice noticing what others missed. He didn't ask for details. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Margaret, Charles's mother. We'd always had a warm relationship. She used to call just to chat about her garden or ask how work was going. This call felt different. Her voice was thin and shaky. "Nicole, please don't tell him yet." I stood frozen in the same kitchen where I'd first seen that photo. "Don't tell him what, Margaret?" She kept repeating the same words, crying softly. "Don't tell him yet." I realized then that the affair was only part of the story. Something even bigger was hiding underneath. We met 2 days later at our usual coffee shop. Margaret looked exhausted, older than her years, hands wrapped tightly around her cup. She told me she had been carrying a secret since almost the beginning of our marriage, something that could have changed everything. She said Emily didn't know about it, and neither did Charles, only her and our old fertility doctor, Dr. Rebecca Collins. I felt the ground shift again. The full truth was still coming, and I could already tell it was going to hurt even more than the photo. Margaret sat across from me in that little coffee shop, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual calm, put-together self was gone. She kept twisting her hands around her coffee cup, knuckles white. "I should have told you both 8 years ago," she whispered. "I've regretted it every single day since." I stayed quiet. In my line of work, silence makes people talk. So I let her find the words. She told me she had known something important almost from the start of our marriage. Something that explained why we struggled so much to have a baby. It wasn't something she was supposed to see. The report had come to the house by mistake, addressed to Charles. She opened it without thinking, the way you do with ordinary mail. What she read changed everything. "It wasn't about you, Nicole," she said, her voice cracking. "The problem wasn't your body." My stomach tightened. For years, I had blamed myself. Every injection, every loss, every quiet night I lay awake wondering what I did wrong. I had carried that guilt like it was mine to fix. Now Margaret was saying it never was. She explained that she panicked. She called Dr. Collins, our fertility doctor, and begged her as a mother to let her handle it her own way. The doctor agreed reluctantly because she'd known the family for years. Margaret hid the report. She convinced herself she was protecting her son from a truth that might break him. Instead, she let me carry the blame for nearly a decade. I asked the hardest question. "Does Emily know any of this?" Margaret shook her head. "No, neither of them knows." She pulled out a small, worn piece of paper from her purse, a note she had written to herself right after reading the original report, so she would never forget the details. She didn't let me read it yet. "You deserve to see the real file," she said, "the complete one from the clinic." Those words hit me hard. The babies in the photo, Charles calling himself Daddy, my sister's secret life with him. Everything suddenly felt even more twisted. Margaret looked at me with tired eyes. "Those babies changed everything, Nicole, but not the way Charles thinks they did." The next morning, I called Dr. Collins before I even finished my first cup of coffee. Her receptionist put me through quickly. The doctor sounded surprised to hear from me after so many years, but she didn't hesitate when I asked to see my old records. "Come in this afternoon," she said. "I'll pull everything myself." The clinic looked exactly the same as I remembered. Soft gray walls, gentle watercolor paintings meant to make bad news feel softer. Dr. Collins met me in her office instead of an exam room. A thick folder waited on her desk. She looked older now, silver strands in her dark hair, but her voice was still kind and direct. "Before I show you this," she said, "I want you to know I've regretted my decision for years. I let a mother's fear override a patient's right to know. I'm truly sorry, Nicole." She slid the folder toward me. I opened it with steady hands. Most of the papers were familiar: hormone tests, ultrasound notes, all the records from our long battle. But near the back was a report I had never seen. It was dated almost exactly 8 years ago and addressed only to Charles. I read it slowly, translating the medical language in my head. The results weren't about me. They were about Charles. Significant male factor infertility, the kind that made natural conception extremely difficult. Dr. Collins had written a clear recommendation that we discuss other options together as a couple. That letter had gone to our house. Margaret opened it by mistake and decided to hide it. She thought she was shielding her son. Instead, she left me believing I was the reason our dreams kept breaking. I sat there in the quiet office and felt 8 years of self-blame rearrange themselves. All those nights I apologized to Charles in the dark. All the times I wondered why my body wouldn't cooperate. None of it had been my fault. The weight I had carried alone had never belonged to me. "Why didn't she ever tell him?" I asked. "Fear," Dr. Collins said gently. "She loved him fiercely. She convinced herself that if he never knew, it would never hurt him. She didn't think about what it would cost you." I asked for copies of everything. She made them without question, like she was finally able to do the right thing after all this time. I drove home in a daze. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a quiet bomb. When I got back, I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, just thinking about every version of my marriage I had believed in. The hopeful one, the grieving one, the betrayed one. None of them had been the full story. That evening, I called Margaret. My voice stayed calm. "I have the file. I know what it says." She was quiet for a long moment. Then I heard relief mixed with exhaustion in her voice. She had carried this secret for 8 long years. Now, part of the burden was finally shared. I didn't confront Charles right away. He was still away, staying with Emily and the twins, playing house in a life built on secrets. I used that time to finish what I had started with the lawyer: meetings, financial records, all the practical steps of ending a marriage while holding an even bigger truth. Margaret called me again a few days later, her voice tight. "Charles is coming home tonight. He wants me to meet the babies properly. He's bringing Emily with him." I knew what that meant for her. She had hidden this for 8 years. Now she would have to face it head on. "Margaret, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for," I told her. "I've hidden it long enough," she said quietly. "It's time." I wasn't there when it happened, but Margaret told me every detail afterward. I could picture it so clearly, like watching a movie I couldn't pause. Charles walked in first, confident as always, the man who never doubted he deserved good things. Emily followed, carrying the babies, looking tired but glowing with that new mother pride. She placed the carriers down carefully. "Mom," Charles said with a big smile, "you're finally a grandmother." The room went silent. Margaret looked at those two small faces and felt 8 years of secrets crash down on her at once. The color drained from her face. She reached for a chair to steady herself. Charles noticed immediately. "Mom, what's wrong?" Emily went pale too. Margaret later told me she could see in Emily's eyes that she had no idea what was coming. Margaret couldn't hold it back anymore. She walked to the study, opened the small fireproof safe she had kept in the back of the closet for years, and took out the sealed envelope. Her hands were shaking as she carried it back to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Charles stared at it. "What is this?" "Sit down," Margaret said. He did. Emily sat across from him, still holding one of the twins. Margaret opened the envelope and laid out the papers one by one: the original lab results, the doctor's letter addressed to Charles, and her own old handwritten note. Charles picked up the medical report. His eyes moved across the page. Then again. and again. The color left his face. "This is about me," he said, voice flat. "Yes," Margaret whispered. "It was never Nicole's fault." The room became so quiet you could hear the baby breathing softly against Emily's shoulder. 8 years. Charles kept repeating it. 8 years he let me believe it was my body failing us. He remembered all the times I cried and apologized to him. The guilt hit him hard. Emily looked stunned. If the report was true, then the twins she carried, conceived during their affair, probably weren't biologically Charles's either. The same issue that stopped us would have affected them too. Charles turned to her slowly. The understanding between them was cold and heavy. Everything they had built together was suddenly on the same shaky ground as our broken marriage. He stood up, report still in his hand. "I need to see Nicole." Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed his keys and left. Charles showed up at my front door a little after 9 that same night. I had seen his headlights cut across the living room wall before the engine even stopped. My heart didn't jump. I already knew exactly why he was there. I took my time. Finished folding the towel I was holding, set it down carefully, and walked over slowly. No rush. This conversation was going to happen on my terms. He looked completely undone standing on the porch. Shirt collar twisted, eyes red and swollen like he'd been crying the whole drive, hair messy from running his fingers through it. In his hand, he clutched that old medical report, the paper now creased and worn from being gripped too tight. "Nicole," he said before I even had the door fully open, "you knew about the report, didn't you?" "I found out 2 weeks ago," I replied, keeping my voice even. "The same way I found out about you and Emily, by accident." He flinched hard when I said her name. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because he deserved my home anymore, but because I wanted whatever came next to happen here, where I felt strong. We sat in the living room, the same couch where we had opened Christmas presents, watched movies, and planned our future for 8 years. It felt like sitting in a museum of a life that no longer existed. Charles started talking fast, the words tumbling out like he was afraid if he stopped I would ask him to leave. He told me everything his mother had shown him. How Emily's face went white when she realized the twins probably weren't his either. How their secret little world fell apart in minutes right there in his mother's living room. He kept circling back to the same point. If only Margaret had told him the truth 8 years earlier, none of this mess would have happened. "I'm not asking you to forgive what I did with Emily," he said, voice cracking. "I know that was wrong on every level. But Nicole, please see this started with a secret that wasn't mine." I let him talk until he had nothing left. That's one thing my job taught me well. When someone is desperate to explain, you stay quiet and they'll tell you more than they mean to. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke. "You're right about part of it," I said. "Your mom made a choice she never should have. She'll live with that regret for the rest of her life, and I believe she already does. But you're wrong about the bigger picture. This didn't begin with her hiding that report. It started the moment you decided to go looking for comfort somewhere else instead of talking to me. You let me believe I was the reason we couldn't have a family. You watched me blame my own body, go through all those painful treatments, lose pregnancies, and cry myself to sleep. And you said nothing while building something new with my sister." He had no comeback. I watched the last bit of fight leave his face. He just stared down at his hands, at that crumpled report, like it was proof of how much had gone wrong. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, sounding smaller than I had ever heard him. "The divorce moves forward," I told him. "Tonight doesn't change any of that." We sat in heavy silence for a long while. Before he left, he looked at me one last time with real sorrow in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Nicole. For all of it." I didn't reply. I just watched from the window as his taillights disappeared down the street. For the first time in weeks, something tight in my chest started to loosen. Not joy yet, but the beginning of peace. The final mediation meeting came 3 weeks later on a bright Thursday morning. I dressed simple and comfortable, nothing fancy. I wasn't trying to look strong anymore. I just was. Daniel Brooks met me outside the courthouse and we went over the last details. The settlement was fair. I didn't push for extra punishment. The truth had already done enough damage. Charles was waiting inside with his lawyer. He looked thinner, tired, like the last few weeks had aged him. When our eyes met across the table, he tried one final time, voice low. "Nicole, is there even a small chance we could try again someday?" I looked at him for a long moment and felt only quiet finality. "No, I might forgive you one day, Charles, but staying isn't the same as forgiving. We're done." He didn't fight it. The meeting went smoothly and quickly. When the last signature was done and the papers were filed, I stepped out into the warm sunlight and felt something I hadn't felt in 8 long years. Completely free. No longer living in a story someone else had written for me. Margaret called me that same evening. She didn't beg or make excuses. She simply said she was proud of how I had handled everything and hoped that one day we could still have some kind of relationship, even without Charles between us. I told her I would like that. Her silence had cost us all dearly, but I could see she was trying hard now to make things right in whatever small ways she could. After that, Charles and I only had short business-like talks about paperwork. I heard through mutual friends that Emily had taken the twins and moved out of state. She couldn't stay in a place filled with reminders of everything that had fallen apart. Charles sold his part of the company and moved to a new city, looking for a fresh start far away from all the broken pieces. As for me, I didn't try to rebuild my life around the loss. I built it around what I had learned. A year after the divorce was final, I used part of the settlement money to start a small foundation. It helps couples struggling with infertility get honest, complete medical information and real support, so no one has to carry blame that was never theirs. I didn't name it after anyone. It didn't need my personal story attached. It just needed to exist and help people. Even though the divorce was moving forward, the emotional storm kept rolling. The weeks after that mediation felt like peeling back layer after layer of an onion that had been hidden for years. Every conversation brought new pain, but also a strange kind of clarity. Margaret became a steady presence in my life during that time. She would text simple messages like, "Thinking of you today," or drop by with fresh flowers from her garden. One quiet evening, she came over and we sat on the back porch as the sun went down. She opened up more than she had before. She told me how Charles had gone back to her house that same night after leaving mine. Emily was still there, rocking one of the twins while the other slept. The air in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Charles couldn't stop looking at the babies, searching their tiny faces for something he now doubted was there. Emily finally spoke up, her voice shaking. She admitted that when she got pregnant so quickly after all our struggles, a small part of her had wondered. But she pushed the thought away because it felt too complicated, too scary. They didn't yell. Instead, it was the kind of low, heavy talk that hurts more because it's honest. Emily said she felt guilty for everything but also confused about what any of this meant for her and the children. A few days later, she made her decision. She packed up the twins and moved out of state to stay with a cousin. She told Charles she needed time to figure out who she was now that the foundation of their secret relationship had crumbled. He didn't try to stop her. Some things break so completely that forcing them back together only makes the damage worse. I heard bits and pieces of this from Margaret, and some from mutual friends who didn't know the full story. It felt surreal, like watching a movie about people I used to know. Charles reached out one last time before he left town. We met at a small park not far from my house, neutral territory with benches and trees that had seen better days. He looked worn down, shadows under his eyes, shoulders hunched like the weight of everything was finally too heavy to carry straight. We sat across from each other on a wooden bench. He spoke first. "I keep replaying all those nights you apologized to me, Nicole. All the times you blamed yourself and I let you. I hate the man I was for allowing that." I looked at him and felt a mix of sadness and relief. I hated myself for a long time too, but I'm learning not to do that anymore. That blame never belonged to me. He asked about the foundation I was building. I explained how it would give couples full access to their test results right away, with counselors who make sure both partners understand everything together. No more secrets. No more one person carrying the load alone. He listened quietly, nodding slowly. When we stood up to leave, he hesitated, then gave me a small, tired smile. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. You're going to build something good out of all this." I watched him walk away across the grass. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, it was only short messages about paperwork or bank accounts. Practical things. The kind of talk that happens when two people have finally accepted that their shared chapter is closed. Emily never reached out to me directly. Part of me felt relieved. What could we possibly say to each other after everything? I hoped she was being a good mom to those babies. They were innocent in all of this. They deserved love and stability no matter how complicated their beginning had been. Sometimes I wondered if she ever got the DNA test done, but I stopped myself from digging. That wasn't my story to chase anymore. The months that followed were a strange mix of good days and hard ones. Some mornings I would wake up feeling light, like I could finally breathe deep again. Other days the memories would hit me hard, the injections, the waiting rooms, the quiet tears in the bathroom so Charles wouldn't see. But each time those feelings came, I reminded myself that none of it had been my failure. I started seeing a therapist myself, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to make sure I healed properly. She helped me see that trusting the wrong people didn't make me foolish. It made me human. I threw a lot of energy into the foundation. I hired a couple of people who had been through similar journeys. We created simple guides, connected with honest doctors, and started hosting small support meetings. At the first official gathering, I stood up in front of about 20 couples. I didn't tell my whole story, but I shared enough. I talked about how secrets, even the ones people keep with good intentions, can cause the deepest wounds. I saw heads nodding. I saw tears, and for the first time I felt like something positive was growing out of all that pain. Margaret and I grew closer during this time. She came over often. We would garden together or just sit with coffee and talk about normal things, books, movies, her flowers. One afternoon she said something I'll never forget. "I lost a son and a daughter-in-law in different ways, but I don't want to lose the relationship we had, Nicole. You've always felt like a daughter to me." "You won't lose it," I told her honestly. We had both been hurt by the same secrets. That created a bond that was different from before, but still real. Through it all, I learned to enjoy my own company in a way I never had. I fixed up the house the way I wanted, painted walls in soft colors, added plants, created a reading nook by the window. I took long walks in the evenings. I read books I had put off for years. Friends asked if I was seeing anyone new. I wasn't ready, and that was okay. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing toward the next chapter. I was learning to live fully in this one. The raw truths had hurt, but they also set me free. Charles, Emily, and Margaret each carried their own pieces of the pain, but I was the one who decided not to let their choices define the rest of my life. That decision felt powerful. It felt like finally stepping out of the shadows and into my own light. Those raw truths kept working on me long after the papers were signed and Charles had moved away. The foundation wasn't just an idea anymore. It became my focus, the thing that turned all that pain into something useful. A year after the divorce was finalized, I sat at my kitchen table one quiet morning with a notebook and a strong cup of coffee. I wrote down everything I wished someone had told us back then. Simple things, honest things, no sugarcoating. I called it Clear Paths Foundation. Not fancy, just honest. The goal was straightforward. Help couples facing infertility get full, transparent medical information from day one. No hidden reports. No one person carrying the blame alone. I used part of the settlement money to get it started, enough for a small office space, a website, and to hire two amazing women who had walked similar roads. One was a former nurse who had dealt with her own losses, the other a counselor who knew how to hold space for tough conversations. Getting it off the ground wasn't easy. There were late nights filling out forms, meetings with doctors who were hesitant at first, and moments when doubt crept in. Who am I to build this? I'd think. But then I'd remember that Tuesday afternoon, the photo on my phone, and all the years I spent blaming myself for something that was never my fault. That memory pushed me forward. Our first big step was creating free guides. Short, easy-to-read booklets that explained common tests, what the results really meant, and questions couples should ask together. No medical jargon that left people confused. We printed them and started handing them out at local clinics. Word spread slowly at first. Then, a fertility center reached out after one of their patients shared our guide with others in the waiting room. They invited me to speak at a small workshop. I stood in front of about 20 couples that day, my hands a little shaky but my voice steady. I didn't tell my full personal story. It still felt too private, but I shared enough. I spent 8 years thinking my body was the problem, I told them. Turns out the truth was buried in a report no one showed us. Secrets, even the ones kept with love, can break more than they protect. You deserve to know everything, together, from the beginning. People came up to me afterward. A woman hugged me with tears in her eyes and said our guide helped her and her husband finally have an honest talk with their doctor. A man told me he felt seen for the first time. That moment, those real connections, made every late night and doubt worth it. Clear paths started growing. We added online webinars, support groups, and partnerships with more clinics. We made sure both partners were always included in the conversation, no matter who the medical issue pointed to. Margaret became one of our biggest quiet supporters. She volunteered at events, helping set up chairs or making coffee for the groups. We never talked about the past in public, but between us there was understanding. She once told me, "Watching you build this is helping me heal too." We had both lost parts of our old lives, but we found something new in helping others avoid the same pain. As the months turned into years, I started noticing changes in myself. The house felt like mine now. I painted the bedroom a soft blue I always wanted, added bookshelves filled with stories that made me laugh and think. I took weekend hikes in the hills outside the city, breathing in the fresh air and feeling grateful for my own strength. Friends invited me to dinner parties, and sometimes I went. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but it felt good to meet people without the weight of old expectations. One evening, almost 2 years after that photo changed everything, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. I thought about Charles. I had heard he was doing okay in his new city, working on himself, staying out of relationships for now. Emily was raising the twins, and from what little I heard, they were healthy and loved. I hoped she had found some peace too. I didn't feel anger toward them anymore, just a quiet acceptance that our paths had split completely. The foundation kept growing in beautiful ways. We helped organize a big community event where doctors, patients, and counselors sat together in open conversations. No one left feeling alone. A young couple came up to me afterward and said our support group gave them the courage to explore adoption after learning the full picture about their options. Seeing their hope reminded me why I started this. Looking back at those 8 hard years, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel a strange kind of gratitude. That pain shaped me into someone who refuses to live in the dark. I learned that patience is important, but so is speaking up and demanding the truth. I learned that family isn't just blood or marriage papers. Sometimes it's the people who choose honesty even when it's difficult. If I could go back and talk to the woman folding laundry on that ordinary Tuesday, I'd tell her this. The photo that broke your heart is also the one that set you free. Stop waiting for other people to tell you who you are or what you deserve. Go find the truth yourself, then build something better with it. Today, when new people join our programs, I see a little of my old self in them. Scared, hopeful, carrying too much alone. I make sure they know they're not alone anymore. Clear Paths isn't huge or famous, but it's real. It's helping people write better endings to their own stories. As for me, I'm still figuring out what the next chapter looks like. Maybe I'll travel more. Maybe I'll meet someone who truly sees me. Or maybe I'll just keep building this life I've created on my own terms. Whatever comes, I know I can handle it. I've already walked through the hardest parts. If you're going through something painful right now, a betrayal, a loss, a secret that's weighing you down, I want you to hear this. You are stronger than you think. The truth might hurt at first, but it will also set you free. Don't carry what doesn't belong to you. Let it go and start building something new. That's where I am now. Not perfect, not completely healed, but moving forward with open eyes and a full heart. The journey that started with a single mistaken photo on a Tuesday afternoon led me here, to a life that finally feels like my own.